Hello and welcome to Victoria to Economy Guide by Slazer. And first of all, let me mention that you can play Victoria without paying any attention or very little attention to economy, knowing just basics of the economy and balancing your budget is not as hard thing to do as most of people think it is. So that is probably the best way to play Victoria if you're a beginner. Just completely ignore economy because that is the most complex one and it's not really meant for beginners. So now to understand economy and the system, you need to understand market and population. So population demands actually. This game is a lot about population and the rise of the common man. So first of all, let's go to the budget and let's see what each of the stratas are doing or types of population. So in the poor strata we have craftsmen, they work in factories. Then farmers, they work on land, producing fruit, grain, etc. Then laborers, they are working mines, quarries, etc. Slaves, which we don't have because we're playing as Prussia. Now the important thing about slaves is that they don't pay any taxes, they have no demands, and they can't work in factories, which is actually the bad thing. So in Victoria 2 you would really like to have no slaves at all. If you're playing some American countries such as Brazil or even the USA, I'm pretty sure they start with slaves. Yeah, they start with 27% slaves, so you would really like to convert them into more effective type of population such as farmers or craftsmen. So anyway, let's back to population. Now we have a middle strata. We have artisans, which are artisans are producing the goods that factories produce in the late game. But in the beginning of the game, artisans are really important because they are much more effective than factories in the early game. So one of the most common mistakes is that people make is that they start making factories in very early in the game, like in the starting few years, which is very bad thing. Why? Well, because your factories won't be producing as many goods as they will in the late game. Your population will be quite unhappy, that's craftsmen, because they won't be getting enough money because factories are not profitable, and you'll often have to close factories, and closing factories makes craftsmen unemployed, which means they will be pissed off. So the better way is to keep artisans for some 20 years until you get researches and a stable economy to support factories, because factories won't make money in the beginning. Now bureaucrats make sure that your country is efficient, and as you can see, state administrative efficiency in every state. You have like that doesn't count for colonial provinces. It's different. I won't go too deeply in that. It's not as important for economy. So ideally you would want in every of your core provinces to have 100 state efficiency. You won't be able to have in provinces that are not your core provinces, you won't be able to have 100%. Even with full tech and enough bureaucrats, you won't be able to have 100%. So you should really focus on having it in your core provinces. Now let's get back to... They are really important, but you don't want to have over 1% of bureaucrats. That would just go to waste. Clergymen. Now clergymen and clerks, they both affect your research points and literacy. Clergymen will only start to affect your literacy once you have more than 2% of them. Now, it's really not necessary to have over 2% of clergymen. 2% of clergymen will guarantee that you have optimal research points, or most of of research points you can have. Now, clerks, you are really... I've never seen anyone having 4% of clerks, and I don't really think it's optimal. It does say here that 4% is required, but you don't really need so many clerks. Now, clerks are actually working in factories, and they aren't directly affecting the factories, but they make sure that craftsmen do well in factories, and they make sure that your factories are running efficiently. Now, of course, we have officers and soldiers. I forgot soldiers, but that's quite easy to understand. Wealthier soldiers promote the officers. Nothing strange there. And now we get to rich strata, which are aristocrats and capitalists. So, aristocrats are making sure that, as you can see, we have only 0.9% of aristocrats in our state, in Brandenburg. Now they make sure that RGO is more efficient. Like, the more aristocrats you have, the RGO will be more efficient. They are not necessary for civilized or westernized nations, and especially for those nations that have no colonial possessions. Like, I find them much more valuable in colonial possessions. Now, for example, if you're playing, for example, Netherlands, and you have Sumatra. Now, Sumatra gets oil in the late game. You might consider increasing aristocrats in Sumatra. This is because then they will boost your oil income or oil production, thus increasing your income. So that might not be a bad reason to increase aristocrats. For the rest of the game, they're pretty much useless, so you don't really need to pay attention to them. Now, capitalists. Capitalists are very important for industrialized nations, and if you ever want to become an industrial nation, you should really consider switching to laissez-faire, which is a free trade economy. Again, I won't be going too deeply into that. It will just confuse people who are new. So capitalists are actually mostly factory owners. So, first of all, you want to make sure that you have enough of them, and you want to make sure that capitalists have enough money. So, this is the reason why you sometimes will see player not taxing rich people. Now, this is a huge mistake in early game. In early game, for example, I will unpause the game very quickly. Okay. Roll back everything to default. Okay, unpause the game. Increase the speed for a while. We don't care about alliances right at the moment. And as you can see, we're losing money, which is really bad. Now, something we'll have to increase is our administration in the beginning. For example, you can go with education instead of administration, but that's personal preferences, really. Now, something we can actually cut off is spending on land units and naval units. Now, navy is really not important in the beginning, especially not as, for example, Prussia. You might want to keep it as for example, UK. France can do without navy, and most of other countries, but UK is really, it's essential for them to keep navy maintained. So anyway, we can cut off on military spending here, and now okay, let's see. Okay, we are losing less money. So what you want to do is either in the beginning of the game, it's very important that you increase tariffs. See, now we're making tons of money. Now this will piss off our artisans, which is actually the good thing. because artisans will later on promote into... They usually demote actually to craftsmen, which is something you want. In the early game they will produce more goods than craftsmen, but in the late game the craftsmen are beat them heavily, like 3-to-1 I guess is the ratio. Like you, in the late game you don't want any artisans. That's ideally. Of course you're going to have them in some colonial possessions or something, but you don't want them ideally. Now you can tax your people. I usually do like this. I can tax them to the maximum. Now, the mistake that most people make is they then don't tax rich people, hoping that they will then make their capitalists richer, which means they will make more factories. Now this is a mistake because you will only keep the same number of capitalists in your country. Of course you will have some increase, but that's really minor increase. What you might want to do is to lower taxes on middle class and then increase a bit on rich class. Why is this important? Unpause the game. Now, some of the middle class will promote to capitalists, which means that in late game you will have more capitalists that can make factories for you. And why do you want capitalists to make factory for you? Well, it's because they have bonuses to factories. If your capitalists are factory owners, then they will produce bonus for your factories, which is much better for you. Plus they spend their own money on expanding factories and you don't have to deal with that. And of course it's much easier to give it to AI than to open your factories on your own, and etc. Now, as you can see, our factories are making no money, most of them. So that's another thing to consider, but let's first finish the talk about population. So the bad thing about this is that your artisans will now have some more money. I've been talking with few friends and they consider that taxing middle people, actually not taxing middle people, is a bad thing, because then you will have artisans for much longer time of the game and they won't demote or promote, which is an okay thing to do. So I really suggest that you actually get taxes to some 80%, which is healthy. And then poor people, it depends. If you're in a war, then perhaps lowering taxes on poor strata would be better, because that will make them less likely to rebel, which is important thing if you're in a war. And then rich people, you can either tax them. I usually tax them to the max in the beginning of the game. Now, after some 1860s, 1870s, you might consider lowering this to 0. That is if you have healthy economy and if you're going to start industrializing your country. If you're not doing that, then keep them at 100%. Now, stockpile, for example, if you were in a war against France, which is pretty likely, especially in the multiplayer games, we need our stockpile for military to be 100%. Now, with 100% tariffs and with these taxing system, our economy is pretty healthy and it can handle the war. So, as you can see, we're still making some money, not too much. That's plus 100, 150. It's okay. It's not a huge deal. Now, we have, of course, this is naval spending, military spending, and overall construction spending. If you're making anything, like making factories, making railroads, ports, even producing regiments or ships, this is the slider for it. This will indicate how much money you want to devote to production. And usually, like 99% of the time, you want that to be at 100%. Sometimes you would like to lower it. If you're losing a lot of money, then you can lower it to, for example, 1%. Never go to 0. That's really important. Go to 1%. This will reduce the money you're currently spending on the goods. Now this will take for example, if you're making port or naval base. This will make for example, you need 30 days to gather all the goods to start making a port. This will make it much more time for your country to gather goods to start producing a naval port. Or actually port, never mind. So for the most of the time you'll keep it at 100%. It won't actually ruin your economy. Like, it will just delay the time that you will be spending your money on. But then you will not get the goods you need at the same pace. Now, education spending, that has to do with your literacy, your research points, and the amount of money you're paying to clergymen. Bureaucrats, administration, once you reach 100%, you don't want to go over 50% of spending. Now the slider indicates how much money you pay for bureaucrats, to bureaucrats actually, and this is the administration efficiency of your country. This only takes effect in your actual states, not the colonial possessions, once again. So once you reach 100%, you just lower that at 50% and keep it at that. You can lower it, it won't make a huge difference, but don't ever go over 50%. If you're a strong country, then you actually don't ever need to go over 50. But you sometimes can consider going to 100% in the beginning of the game to make it faster until you get to 100% of administration efficiency. So let's assume that we are at 100%. We don't need to go over 50. Now, social spending, that is only important if you have social reforms, which for the most time you won't have, and that goes to pensions, subsidies, and I'm not sure if safety regulations are considered as into that category in social spendings. I think it's not, but don't really quote me on that. So military spending, for the most time, you will want that at 100% because you want more soldiers, unless you're playing some specific country and you don't want so many soldiers. It's not a huge deal. You would mostly use your national focuses to increase the amount of soldiers you have, so it's not so important. And now the most important thing about economy is tariffs. A lot of people don't understand how tariffs work, and they would just keep tariffs at 0% in the beginning of the game, hoping that this would help their factories. Now, as you can see, we're already starting to lose money. We're already at minus 250. And they would go, oh, fuck, my economy is ruined. I don't know what to do. How do I fix it? The game is broken. No. See, some people that are actually have some knowledge of the game, they're not too bad at the game, but they don't completely understand it. They would go, oh, well, tariffs ruin your factories. What tariffs do is that they increase the amount of money you have to spend on importing goods. And also, tariffs, once your population is importing goods or selling them, your country gets adds the price on those goods, and then that additional price is going into your budget. That is basically like taxes. Now, why is this important? If you for example have let's go with glass factory. Let's close all of the other factories. Okay. So unpause the game. As you can see, our glass factory is making around 9.5, 9.8, up to 10. Well, a bit more actually. Need to wait some time until our economy stabilizes. Okay, never mind. So now let's increase our tariffs and go to the production screen. Now let's go to production. We are producing 98 coal. Now our factories are actually, let's go to trade for it. Now our factories need 11 coal. Population needs 28 coal. So that means we have enough coal to make our factories work well. Those that are using coal. Let's unpause the game. So as you can see, it dropped a bit, but it's still around 15, 16, 17. We're not losing any money even though our tariffs are at 100%. So this is because we have enough goods in our country that we don't have to import them to make our factories work, which means that our factories don't have to pay additional money getting goods that we don't have to make them work. So tariffs only affect those factories that you don't have goods to support. You don't have goods to support in your country. Now, some people would like go, oh well, okay, you know, if my factory is making £5 a day, for example, then you know I will reduce my tariffs. For example, they I don't know, they have luxury clothes factory or luxury furniture factory. For luxury furniture factory you need tropical wood. Now Prussia of course doesn't have tropical wood, so they would reduce their tariffs to 0%, so that their luxury clothes factory will then make a lot of money, because they don't have to pay additional value to the goods they're importing. Then they make a final product which they sell at ridiculous prices, and you get a lot of money from that factory. But the downside is that all of your other factories won't be making enough money to cover the losses of you not tariffing your people, or actually not tariffing your trade. Now, of course, effective tariffs have to do with administration. So, let me go like this. In the early game, you, almost without any exceptions, perhaps the UK might be the only exception in considering this, and perhaps France to some point, but all of the other countries, you want to have 100% tariffs. You need that money. It's essential for the later stages of the game. In the mid-game, somewhere from 1860s to 1890s, oh no, not 1890s, but 1900, you might consider lowering your tariffs to 0. This is the time when you will start relying on your industry, and you want to boost your industry. In those times, your factories will make a lot of money, but won't make enough to be to cover all of the other losses of your economy. Also, your tech will be enough to have enough workers in those factories, but it won't be enough to make them profitable. So this is why you might consider lowering your tariffs to 0% to boost your economy in a way of having more workers work in your factory, because they will have more money, and that will actually make them happier. Also, that will help your factories to make some more money and to be more attractive for your people. In the late game, something I really like to do, as industrialized nation is to lower all of my taxes to 0 and just boost my tariffs to 100%. This will make this is especially good if you're a strong economy. One of the great powers or secondary powers, you have a lot of goods, you have most of the goods needed for your factories to run. This will make your people very happy. They will be less likely to revolt, less militant. Your factories will still produce a lot of money because your technology will be high enough to support them, and you'll get ridiculous amounts of money from your tariffs, because most of the other countries will import goods from your country, and all of the additional value of those goods will go directly into your budget, which is great. So most of the world's strongest economies can handle this. This way of taxation and tariffs will make your countries insanely rich. Okay, so that's the budget. Now we have to consider trade. Now trade is a very difficult one to understand. It's actually very simple, but there are minor things that I might or might not mention that could often confuse people. So there are all of the different goods here, raw materials. Now raw materials are used for factories to make industrial goods. Consumer goods are also some, for example, fruit or grain are needed for some of the factories. As you can see here, grain is needed for liquor factory, fruit is needed for wine factories, etc., 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 and military goods. Now, sometimes you will, for example, playing a minor country such as, let's go with Portugal, and now you want to make a huge fleet, and you have enough money to make navy, but unfortunately your navy is not being produced. Your clipper transports are not being produced, and this is because you don't have enough clipper convoys. Now the problem is that okay, let's go with that. Clipper convoys are not currently in high demand, but in most of the games. Okay, let's go with this. For example, Prussia starts making tons of clippers. Now trade. As you can see now, the clipper convoys are in high demand. Before I started making clippers, there was supply of 28 and demand was around the same. So it wasn't in high demand. But now the supply is at 22, 23, and demand is still at 38. This means that smaller countries, such as, for example, Portugal, will not get clippers. This is because the way you're getting goods goes by country rankings. So, for example, if UK needs clippers, they will be the first country to get them, and then Russia, France, Prussia, etc., etc., etc. So if demand is higher than supply, prices will go up, and if the opposite, prices will go down. For example, as you can see, for the moment steel prices dropped, and then there is a high demand for steel now, and they're going up. So economy is not static. I mean, trade is not static, and you will see often that prices go up and down, and that's something you'll have to get used to. Now, all of the economy in the beginning of the game is automated, and the AI is controlling it. Now, sometimes, if you're playing uncivilized countries such as Japan, it's very important that from the beginning of the game you deselect automate. This is especially important while you're uncivilized. Later on, once you westernize, it's not as important. You deselect automate, you select the amount of clippers you want, and confirm trade. Click on that. Don't forget to click. Now, what this does is that once there is a less need for clippers, your country will stockpile them. Like, you will buy them from market and stockpile. So once you need to actually make ships, you don't have to wait for your country to gather resources, because you already have them in stockpile. As you can see, for example, Prussia already has some canned food, ammunition, small arms, and artillery in stockpile. And then again, all of these goods, they are not stockpiled and you don't have them. So that's the trade. Now, did I forget something? There's a market activity. If you go to activity, this is how much you're, I think, exporting. So our top export product is cattle, actually, and our top important good is tea, wine, wool, etc., etc. As you can see to the right, you have costs, those, and of course we are getting 105 from cattle. So even as Prussia, one of the strongest countries in the game, as you can see, we are actually losing money. Like, all of our trade is actually losing us money. So that's something. This is why you need to have high tariffs. And then new population need, of course, there is that. Factories, etc., etc., etc. Now, oil and rubber, you can ignore those until some 1910, 1920s. It doesn't really matter. Once you start producing airplanes, tanks, and stuff like that, it gets important. So that's trade, production. Now, factories have a lot of, as you can see, our glass factories is still making the same amount of money, even though we have tariffs set at 100%. Again, this is because we have enough goods to cover for it. Now, one more thing that is important to mention is that if, for example, now let's switch the government type so we can make our factories. If you want to make a factory in Posen, let's say we have, okay, let's go with this. So as you can see, we have almost 5k unemployed craftsmen in Schlesien, or Schlesien. So this is here. Now you want to make a factory there. First of all, you want to consider what factories you need and what factories will make the most money. This is, as you can see that here, daily output. This is how much money your factories should make. That's estimated. And now if it's red, then that means that those factories won't be actually making money. But this is all assuming that you have those goods that are required as daily inputs. Now, as you can see, if you hover over this, you will see, no, that's not the one. Okay, here. On the bottom, you have possible bonus from plus 25% from producing coal in the state. So in the Brandenburg, we don't have coal. We have no coal, which means we are losing that bonus. So if in early game you're running as a state capitalism, then you might consider making those factories that have bonus to for example, we have coal and iron in Schlesien. Schlesien is the right one, I guess. Now, since we have a coal and iron, the best factory to make there is steel factory, closely followed by machine parts factory. As you can see, once we have coal and steel factory there, it will get 50% bonus in production, which is actually great. So you actually want to make chained factories, like those factories that give each other bonuses in one state. That is the best way to set up your economy for later stages. Now, the bad thing about that is, for example, if you're having laissez-faire in the late game, AI will make shit tons of factories, upgrade them, but the AI doesn't care about bonuses. They will just make random factories. I guess it's not completely random, but not the most profitable factories you would want. So if you really want to pay attention on that, I really suggest that you, at least for first 3 or 4 factories in each state, that you make them on your own, to make sure that you have those bonuses, because they will really help your economy. Let's stop making these. Actually, it doesn't matter. Just ignore it. Now, of course, more important thing is infrastructure. If you have better infrastructure, then your factories will make more money. And the reason is, if you have better railroads, goods will take less time to transport from one province to another, and the trade will be much more cost efficient, and thus your factories will make more money. So whenever you can get railroads are extremely important for industrialized nations. I can't really put enough emphasis on this one. So foreign investment, that's really not something you should pay much attention to it. You can make factories in foreign countries if you're a great power, but it's not as efficient as if you're making them in your own country. Now, one more thing to consider is, if you're a great power, you go to trade, you go to market activity. Now you check the goods that you need and that cost you the most. Now, okay, so we need wine, and you want to see which of the other countries are producing a lot of wine. Or, for example, wine is not the best example. Okay, so we need tea and fruit. Now let's go with fruit. RGO, we select fruit, for example Greece, and we go with RGO. You'll see those red spots and so on. So now we see, for example, let's go with something that is close to us and that we can easily get. Okay, let's go with Greece, for example. Greece produces a lot of fruit. Not a lot, but some. You might consider swearing them. What swearing them does is that you won't be paying additional value to the importing of fruit or goods from Greece, which then it will of course ruin Greek economy, because they will not get any money from selling you goods. They will only get the base value, which is nothing. Really, it's nothing. And this will boost your economy in a way that you won't be paying the additional value of those goods, which means you will not anymore require 69 pounds on importing fruit, but for example 40 or 20, I don't know, just an example, and so on and so on. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm trying to remember if I actually forgot something. So this is the screen where you can see how much each country or each great power has invested in some of the countries. Production screen is very important. A lot of people don't use it, but this is where you can see how many goods you are producing. And actually, now this is very important. As you can see, we have a glass factory. The glass factory is full. We can, as you can see, it has almost 10k employees, which is almost the maximum for the level 1. We're not going to increase it. And when you go to production, you can see that our artisans are still producing 3 times more glass than our craftsmen, than our factory. So your factories are not as efficient in the early game as artisans are. Once you get technology, you want to switch from artisans to factories. This is especially important for smaller countries. Don't focus on your factories in early game. That will just ruin your economy. And why is the economy so important in this game? Well, I don't know if you watched the multiplayer we played last Saturday, or no, that was actually 2 weeks ago. I played Netherlands, and in the late game, my economy was doing so well that I was able to subsidize NGF, Austria, Brazil, and USA, and still make money. Like, they were all in a war with France and UK. I was actually in the war on the same side. So I was paying my soldiers, I was paying their soldiers, all of their soldiers, and I was still making money. That's ridiculous. And that's not like making, well, 50 pounds or something. No, I was actually making quite a lot of money. Like, I was making 500 pounds. With all of the soldiers and navy fully paid. So, that's how ridiculous economy can be, once you do it right. Like, in that game, I really focused on economy and a bit less to the military spending and etc. Now, obviously, the best tech for economy is not industry, but commerce. And one of the best techs in the early game you can get is ad hoc money bill printing. This will boost your administration efficiency and also provide with a bonus of +6 to tax efficiency. If you go for stock exchange, you will only get +8. You get 8 tax efficiency, while with ad hoc money bill printing, you get +6 and +5 to administration efficiency, which is awesome. That's really one of the most underrated techs. This is the money-making tech. Now, also very important tech is, and one of my favorite techs is market functionality. Market structure, as you can see in diplomatic influence, that's something you actually want as a great power, but it's not necessary. The important thing about this tech is that it increases your mining output and farming output. This is essential for the early game economy. Later on, you want organized factories and economic thought and critique. These are all for factory bonuses. So you don't have to go for monetary system fully. Like, I usually get ad hoc money bill printing and then focus on market functionality, and then later on switch to industry tax. Of course, these have the most bonuses for factories. Railroads, immensely important. Like, you can't live without those. Like clean coal, metallurgy, it depends on which goods you have in your country and which goods you want to produce. If you don't have coal, you don't have steel, precious metals, and so on, you might consider this one as not really worth taking. Of course, you want to have it later on, but you might want to go for interchangeable parts and high and low pressure steam engines for the beginning. Power is really important tech for the early game. Again, this will make your economy make tons of money in the beginning. So commerce, market functionality, and industry power. These two techs will make insane amounts of money for you. Now, going into wars will ruin your economy, while staying neutral in most of wars will make your economies bloom and will make your factories make ridiculous amounts of money, because especially those that are producing military goods. I think that's pretty much it for economy. If I forgot something, or if you have any questions about economy, feel free to post them on either YouTube or on forum or even Reddit, wherever. So thanks for watching and enjoy your economy in Victoria 2.